I'm Ben Ryman, and this is Behavior Speak. My guest today is Dr. Jessica Sangiq Ullrich, an assistant professor at the Institute for Research and Education to Advance Community Health at Washington State University. She is a descendant of Sangiq, the native village of Wales, and a tribal citizen of the Nome Eskimo community. In this conversation, Dr. Ullrich discusses her background, the significance of cultural identity, and the impact of intergenerational trauma on Indigenous communities. She emphasizes the importance of connectedness in promoting Indigenous well-being and highlights her research methodology, which focuses on community engagement and spirituality. Jessica advocates for language preservation and community workshops as essential tools for healing and empowerment, ultimately envisioning a future where Indigenous communities thrive through cultural practices and interconnectedness. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Before we get started, I just want to acknowledge that I'm producing this podcast on the lands of the Climate, Quilbuck, and Seashell First Nation. All right, Jessica, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'm Jessica Saniguq Ullrich, and I am a tribal citizen of Nome Eskimo community in Alaska. I'm a descendant of Sangiq, the native village of Wales, which is the westernmost tip of the United States, closest to Siberia. And my family eventually moved to more of the Anchorage urban area, and I grew up in Wasilla. But I had the opportunity to be close with my family, some time with them up in Nome, and I definitely feel that ancestral connection to both Nome and Wales, Alaska. And Saniguq, on my mom's side, my dad is from St. Louis, Missouri, and I have European roots there as well. And my family is pretty well known as being artists. Two uncles who were amazing artists here in Alaska, Ron and Joe Saniguq. My grandmother was their oldest sister, and I'm a descendant of amazing, strong Saniguq women. That was a teaching that my mom gave me as a little girl. Anytime I felt like I was wanting to give up or that I couldn't do something, she'd give me that little boost of remember who you're from. And so my great-grandparents from Wales, Alaska were orphaned during the 1918 influenza epidemic. Unfortunately, 60% of our community passed away all at once. My grandmother attended boarding school. My mom, unfortunately, had all the adverse childhood experiences as a little girl and struggled with that trauma and had 5 beautiful, healthy children, though. She really did her part to help us break some of the intergenerational trauma cycles that were happening in my family. And I grew up with similar challenges and have been on a healing journey myself, and figuring out what it means to be healthy and well and in right relationship with others again. So yeah, that's just a little background. I also have 2 amazing teenage daughters who have been the loves and lights of my life. And I can't believe how fast time is going by there. My oldest will be a senior in high school next year.
Wow.
And my partner, we've been together for 20 years. He just graduated from law school, and we were able to move back home to Anchorage, where we had a home that we rented out while we were away for that journey.
Amazing.
And I should say where I work. I am currently an assistant professor at Washington State University in the iReach program that is really focused on promoting Indigenous health.
Right on. Can you tell me a little bit more about some of those places that you kind of started out, the Nome Eskimo community in Wales, and somewhere in there, can you maybe clear up for me and maybe others term Eskimo in there, and sort of, and it's a term we try not to use, I've been taught to not use anymore. Do you have a certification with the International Behavior Analysis Organization, the Qualified Applied Behavior Analysis Credentialing Board, the Behavior Analyst Certification Board, or are certified through your region's Behavior Analyst Credentialing Board, you can earn continuing education units for this episode by going to www.behaviorspeak.com and clicking on CEUs. The first secret word is wellness.
I know. I think when my tribe first was forming, that term was a more commonly accepted word at the time. And Nome is a place where multiple Indigenous cultural people kind of moved to and started to come together from multiple ethnic backgrounds that were all kind of under this umbrella term at the time of Eskimo. So we have Inupiaq, Yupik, St. Lawrence Island Yupik people who many migrated to the Nome area. It's sort of a community hub for multiple smaller rural villages. So, yeah, but I feel like the more commonly accepted term now is Inupiaq. And I know we've had conversations in my tribe about we look at changing the name, and that's still an ongoing discussion.
And then because again, I'm in Canada and we're not educated a lot on these communities and the history of these communities. We're just given new language to describe them, with no sort of connection to sort of those communities that we get into more later. When I was growing up, I was taught stop using the word Eskimo and now use the word Inuit. And does that word have any meaning either, or is that just another sort of term we threw in there?
No, I feel like that describes a large group of people across the Arctic. And I think that in my experience, that term has applied more so to the Indigenous Arctic people of Canada. But I think that it definitely applies to Alaska and across Greenland and beyond. It is if you're told to use that term is sort of my policy.
Yeah. I think also, and hopefully as I learn more from you today and some of the conversations I've had, it's the people that are telling me too that are important here. And it wasn't people from the north that told me to use either term. It was sort of, my teachers and my family or whatever. That's not the word you use anymore, Ben. It's this word now, and not having it. And how I know that there's been a lot of kind of migration in the north related to sort of some different things like the disease, like schooling, the colonization and whatnot. How long have those communities been where they are? How far back did those tribes go?
Yeah, so the community of Wales is a very old, hundreds of years old community. To my knowledge, it was a very active place because of where it was located. It was sort of like a stopping point for multiple communities in the area where hunters, were following the animals, and it was also right across from Siberia there. So it was just a large community back in the days from what I've learned. And it really makes sense when you see the geography of the area. And Nome is a newer community. So that formed primarily during the gold rush. That's where a lot of there's an influx of people coming in and mining for gold. And this is where schools started to get established. And so some communities a lot of people moved there to access those sorts of resources and services. And so there are actually 4 tribes that are located in Nome itself, including Nome Eskimo community.
And one other question before we start kind of getting more into your work and kind of how you got there. For those that are able to see the video of the episode, I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about the significance of your tattoo and kind of what that means.
Yeah, so this is a traditional ceremony that women engaged in years ago that we're bringing back to life after it was deemed forbidden for a number of years, primarily by missionaries. And in my community, it was a ceremony that could mean a number of things. And for each woman, there's a personal meaning involved. And And not everyone wants to share that story with others publicly, like in
Sure.
this setting. For me, the lines represent my ancestors and the current generations and future generations, and being mindful of the past, present, future. It also means it was a way of protection. That's what one of my elders explained, that was part of our teachings and stories, was to have the markings, the traditional markings on your chin, was a form of spiritual protection.
Well, thank you for sharing with me. So tell me a little bit about how you kind of got into this sort of field in the first place. What was sort of your journey toward the scholarly path?
Yeah, so I have a background in child welfare, which is kind of not surprising given some of my background and life experiences. Saw that there are a lot of people hurting, and that we needed to have a better way to work with families who were struggling with grief and substance use and relational issues and mental health and those kind of things. And I love children. I've always, all the work that I've ever done, and the schooling that I've been through, I have done it for the love of our children and our earth. And I worked in that field for about 10 years and was an intern, and worked as a frontline family services worker, attempted to do some prevention work, was a supervisor, an Indian Child Welfare Act specialist, and a trainer eventually. So I've seen it from multiple angles. And that's when I decided I wanted to go back to school, because I felt like we needed some research to help us better understand how to get at the root of what I was frequently seeing with families.
Mm.
And I started to learn about this concept of historical trauma and intergenerational trauma. And I'm so grateful for the scholars that have shed light on this very huge topic and connected some of the dots that helped me better understand what I was experiencing, what my family experienced, as well as my community and my ancestors. So I decided I wanted to go back to school and learn how to do research in a good way. And that's where I'm so grateful for the mentors and some of the tribal child welfare leaders who helped me really think about not just studying the trauma, but studying what it means to be healthy and well. I feel like that shift to focusing on our strengths and our wellness and what it has been that has helped us get through all of these challenging colonial oppressions, was that made all the difference. And that's been my journey, to really focus on how we have maintained what we have maintained despite everything.
And what historically has been the approach for when you were sort of doing your work in sort of the child welfare? What was sort of the approach, and what were some of the sort of the main issues that were kind of coming up for kids in your community?
Yeah, from what I saw in child welfare in the attempts to help families, there's a lot that was being missed. I think that the intervention of child removal often compounded the trauma that children and parents and families and communities were experiencing. I do believe that there are times when, yes, we need, level of intervention. I'm not denying, there are some really challenging things that, children should never have to go through. And there does need to be someone stepping in and bringing that to a stop. And I just feel like the approach, though, was very authoritarian, very punitive, and focused on the parents. Oftentimes, they're looking at things as like the concept of child removal. I think we just think of it as a child removed from their parents, but from my research and what I've learned from the young people who've been through the system, child removal is they are removed not only from their parents, but from their siblings, from their schools, their friends, their neighbors, their favorite playgrounds, their toys, their animals, the pets, everything. And so I just think that we don't look at things through the right lens sometimes. We're not listening to people with that lived experience enough. And so far from the way that I've seen child welfare intervene, it's kind of a crisis-oriented Band-Aid approach oftentimes. And that's where I felt like, I was trying to help parents heal and get the skills they need and be healthy and well so that they could take care of their own children and their families. And we were missing the mark over and over again, despite, all sorts of, the key word is active efforts. We didn't have the outcomes that we wanted to have. And despite this policy, Indian Child Welfare Act policy, we still had a very highly disproportionate number of Alaska Native children in out-of-home care. And it's still high. It's like 68% of all children in out-of-home care here are Alaska Native. And that's why I was like, we got to come up with something else. I need to figure out what it is that can actually address disproportionality and the root trauma issues that families are experiencing to see if we can finally see some better outcomes for families. And that's where during a literature review process, I was studying what our concept of Indigenous well-being is. And I came across this term connectedness. And it was defined by the People's Awakening team of Southwest Alaska as the interrelated welfare of an individual, family, community, and the earth. And when I saw that concept and that term defined that way by this awesome group of Alaska Native scholars in Alaska, I was like, that's what we're not understanding, and that's not what we're applying in multiple systems, especially child welfare, just based on legally who we're serving and intervening with and everything. It was like we would focus on the children or the parents as individuals separately, maybe the parent-child dyads, but not the whole family, not the extended family, not the whole community, and not this relationship that everyone has with our earth. And so I took that term and that became my focus, and that's where my whole research journey has taken me. I'm learning more about it, and I'm adding to it. I'm going more in depth in many aspects of that concept, and then I'm doing my best right now to work with my tribe to apply it and see if this is really the solution to helping our families be healthy and well, acknowledging the trauma and the hurt and the pains that have happened and been experienced, but knowing how to live in right relationship, how to be healthy and well again, based on our ancestral teachings, our cultural traditional practices, which are really relational. And then us returning to knowing who we are, where we come from, beyond all the social constructs and what others have tried to tell us that just, it doesn't make sense. Yeah, that's been the journey, the research journey.
So can you walk me through a bit how you initially kind of developed this whole framework?
Yeah, so I looked to a number of models, and there's a paper that I published a number of years now, a while back. But in that literature review process, I was looking to different Indigenous well-being models from Canada, from the United States, from Aotearoa, New Zealand, partially because of some of our common history of boarding schools and some of the colonial oppressions that we've experienced and some of the challenges that have sort of arisen as a result of that trauma and how it shows up in child welfare. So I learned so much from these models, and that's where I started seeing some of this concept of connectedness sort of showing up across multiple models. And there were a couple pieces that I added to it based on what I was learning from others. And one element that got added was intergenerational connectedness. So part of how we help our children and families be healthy and well is that knowing and remembering of who we are and who our ancestors are, having that relationship to our ancestors and that understanding that we have future generations counting on us, that we are future ancestors. And so that was coming up time and time again as I was reading the literature. And the other thing that I saw and added to this framework of connectedness was the spiritual connectedness, and how often we don't talk about spirit and spirituality when we're engaged in child welfare practices or education and multiple systems that are working with our people and kind of bypassing or ignoring how important our spirituality is for us. And one of the things that I saw, and I know it's kind of controversial, but with this concept of spirituality, I feel like our spirituality is what we're commonly calling culture nowadays. So when we talk about culture, that's like our way of life. It's the foods we eat. It's the names we have. It's our ceremonies. It's our stories, our language, subsistence, land-based practices, our definition of beauty, our humor, like just so many things that we call culture. I was like, that's our spirituality. And that's different from religion. And I believe there is some overlap. I want to honor, those who do have a certain faith that they practice and follow, and church, religious ceremonies and practices and teachings and all that. But I feel like someday I hope like maybe we think of our culture as spirit, as our spirituality. And part of the reason why I came to that understanding of culture versus spirit is I went to my grandmother when she was still alive, and she was a fluent Inupiaq speaker in her whole life. And I was like, Grandma, how do we say culture in our language? Because I was wanting to write about it and share some of our language and teachings as I was learning about connectedness. And she looked at me funny and she's like, culture, what the heck is that? Like, so that's when I said, well, it's explain what culture is. And then she said, oh, you mean Inusik, and that means spirit in our language. And I was like, that's when I had that mind-blowing moment when I was like, oh my gosh. So I have this aspect that I've added to the connectedness framework that is spirit, culture/spirit. Because we're not there yet to fully call everything about our culture spirituality, but maybe we'll get there. And so I'm trying to bridge that gap a little bit.
No, I think that's huge. And I think I appreciate you having a respect for religion, but at the same time, sometimes I feel like the term religion is very limiting, and even in some of sort of the colonizer faiths, there's sort of the doctrine of the church, but then there's just one's own connection with, call it God, call it creator, call it the spirit. So I could see how it's spirituality would be a really powerful and salient component of all of that. I wonder about, and also your point about language and your grandmother trying to translate culture. A lot of the conversations I've had with guests in Indigenous communities seems like the English language is a very individualistic kind of language. It's often hard to translate terms, because I often hear guests say, well, we just don't have words for those things because those concepts don't exist for us. And so how has language sort of played a role in sort of your story and your growth?
Yeah, so I have not always been a fluent speaker. I've learned words, like there were words that I grew up hearing, and even my nickname growing up, Una, like my whole family called me Una my whole childhood, and it meant this one. And I was given that nickname because I was my mom's first daughter. And that was like her pet name for me, like cherished, loved first daughter name. And so I heard words, and I still say words, but I am not fluent in terms of having a conversation with others. And I'm working on it. I've been part of a language group who has been doing our best to document and record and work with our elders and encourage others to show up and come to a weekly language Zoom session that we hold and come to language workshops. So I'm doing my best to support that work through research and grants and helping my community with that. But it's a place of grief in my heart. I feel like there were times I remember hearing my grandmother fluently speaking with all of these elder Inupiaq women, and they were just laughing. They were always laughing. And I felt like I wish I knew what they were saying so I could, be part of that joyful energy that they had about them. And so, there's definitely some grief and disconnect that has come with language loss in my family. And so I'm doing my best to, help our our community find a way to reconnect with language, including building our own tribal school up in the Nome area, so that just becomes part of the norm. I see that there are a lot of young people really hungry to learn our language and speak it. So I'm very encouraged that we'll get there. We just gotta make it happen somehow. But yeah, it's languages, from what I've also seen in the literature, it's one of those things that helps us build and develop connectedness. So language connects us to our ancestors, to our family, our community, to the earth. Like, there are many stories that language comes from the earth, and if you want to know a people, you need to know their language, because it really organizes how you even think and how you relate and how you connect. So that's part of why it's such an important piece of, I'm doing my best out here to, build and support connectedness. We got to have our language. And I feel like that's the same thing in multiple Indigenous communities. We're all in it. We're all in the process of doing our best to keep our languages strong.
And part of the reason I asked is sort of this concept of intergenerational connectedness seems to be the, sort of the antidote, one of the big antidotes for intergenerational trauma. Intergenerational trauma, of course, is in part a direct result of, the punitive nature of colonization on those original ancestors, but then also all of the things that we forbade and took away from that generation of folks was then not passed on to the next generation, like language and customs and ceremony and so on. I definitely see the need for intergenerational connectedness, but I also see that potentially being one of the most difficult pieces to make happen, because some of these communities, some of these tribes don't have access to the languages at all. There are no speakers. And so,
yeah.
and I wonder if you could just talk more about what intergenerational connectedness looks like and can look like, and how folks can get there.
Yeah, so part of, after I did this big literature review on Indigenous well-being and came across that concept of connectedness, I drafted up that connectedness framework, and I knew I needed to speak with Alaska Native knowledge bearers. And that's when I conducted interviews with 25 amazing people who shared their stories and gave insights on how to be healthy and well, given the intergenerational trauma, the historical trauma, the interpersonal trauma that they may have experienced. And that's where I engaged in this process of Indigenous story work, or Indigenous storying, where after I coded all the transcripts and, did that sort of really close-up analysis of the stories that were shared, I would go out on the land and I would take these long walks, and I'd be hiking up a mountain, and I would have these insights, like these sort of epiphanies of some of those important lessons that need to be learned across all 25 stories that were shared. And one of those lessons, and I feel like this is part of what will promote intergenerational connectedness, as well as the other forms, family connectedness, community connectedness, spiritual, and, was that and also the other important lesson, or important form of connectedness that I've come to understand and added to this framework, was in an internal connectedness. So being in relationship with ourselves, being in right relationship with ourselves, loving who we are, knowing who we come, where we come from. And but one of the lessons across those 25 knowledge bearers was, we first have to acknowledge the trauma. We need to talk about it. We need to see where there's still potentially disconnect occurring, and do our best to repair those relationships where there has been a relational wound that has happened on multiple levels. And that's not an easy process. I feel like, sometimes people are scared that if we talk about this, it's just going to make it worse. And there are valid concerns that, we don't want to open something up and then people get beyond overwhelmed and then not know how to heal from that wound or something. So that's valid, but not talking about it and just pretending like everything's fine and just continuing to live the way that some of us are living and accepting these dynamics. That's the part that's not healthy. So that was an important lesson. And I feel like the solution, the solution is how to heal. And after we acknowledge the trauma is coming back to this, what supported connectedness for us. So maintaining relational continuity where we have strong, healthy relationships, repairing what we can through our spiritual, cultural traditions, because I've also come to understand that those are relational actions. It's like our relational medicine. So this Tavlogun, bringing back our tradition of the Tavlogun ceremony, that is a relational medicine that is helping repair a disconnect with my ancestors and with the tradition that really strengthened our women as a collective community. So that's just one example. But even being called by our Inupiaq names, I see a pride. I see sitting up a little taller that happens in our young people, and we call them by their Inupiaq name. There's little things like that provides that medicine, that way of building and maintaining connectedness relationships at multiple levels. And that when we do that, when we take that action, when we express that love by expressing our relational values, our traditional relational values, then that's what helps us have a healthy relationship with ourselves and being proud of who we are and not letting someone else define us and not no way am I going to let anyone mistreat me. In no way am I going to harm someone else. That's how important it is that we're in right relationship and have that internal connectedness. So that's when I've come to understand as well, when we're living life from that place and we live in right relationship with others, there's this reciprocal health and well-being dynamic that emerges where we go beyond being an individual to being part of a collective, interdependent, interconnected collective. And so who I am is, yes, I'm me. I'm a unique spiritual being on this planet for this period of time, but I am of a family. I'm of a community. I'm of the earth. And that recognition and that knowingness means that I have some responsibilities in this lifetime that I need to fulfill and provide and ensure that the next generations will have what I got to have in terms of the love and the relationships and the connection with this amazing, beautiful earth. So it's important that each person be taught how to live in this way. And I think we're relearning this right now. And that's part of what my tribe asked me to do after they heard me speak about connectedness in this framework. They're like, okay, well, here's where the rubber meets the road. Teach this to our community. And I was like, yes. And I took that opportunity and have developed a draft. It's not a curriculum, but it's like a way of teaching that to our community members. And we're piloting it still, and it's been phenomenal. And I can't wait to share more about that as we're continuing to learn and hopefully help other communities do similar projects, or maybe they're already other tribal communities are doing this, but connecting some dots and helping us describe and explain what it is we're witnessing and observing in families that's helping promote that healing and connectedness.
It's amazing that you were able to it must have been amazing to have these conversations with these knowledge bearers. Can you tell me more about them and who they were and sort of were these young folks? Were these elders? Were these?
Yeah, it was a range of people. This was for the dissertation part of the research. Right. I spoke with Alaska Native knowledge bearers of the child welfare system. So some of them had experience and were foster care alumni, some were relative caregivers, and some had been foster parents. And I was primarily wanting to speak with this group of people because of the partnerships I had and with community partners, and then also some of my background and trying to answer some of these questions about how do we better support families who may be interfacing with the child welfare system. That's who I learned from. And I'm continuing to learn from members of my tribal community just generally. We've held some gatherings and learned from them, got feedback on, okay, this is what we're thinking about doing on how to teach this. And they're like, you're not going to teach this through classroom style learning lecture mode, and that kind of process it's not gonna cut it. They said we need our people to feel it, to experience it. To live it means that you're going to do it in this way, which was you need to get them out on the land. And they helped us see that through our subsistence land-based activities, that's what teaches everything we need to know about connectedness and relationship. And it was awesome. So we did that. I'm glad we followed that advice because it worked.
Can you tell me a little more about what those activities are and sort of how you've been going about this pilot? The second secret word is health.
Yeah, so we decided to host weekend wellness workshops. So Piagic is our word for wellness in our language. And so we're calling it a Piagic camp, like a Piagic workshop. And we invite parents and children, and sometimes it's grandparents, parents and children out to this tribally run bed and breakfast type facility that can host multiple families all at the same time. And it's about a 40-minute drive out there in Nome. And here in the Anchorage area, we hosted it in Nome and also in Anchorage because we wanted to see if it could work in an urban setting as well as a rural setting. And we have a number of tribal members in both. But yeah, so we just got people away for a weekend and had multiple activities that we could implement, like, and do with the families, depending on weather and depending on the season. So we're holding them more in like the fall time right now. So we have berry picking. We're planning to do fishing or fish cutting. We learn how to make healing plant medicine salves, like the kind that, can take away the aches and pains in your hands and joints and stuff. Learning different ways to cook up some of these foods, like the fish, so we've had like fish soup and berries when desserts and jams. So, and then we try to integrate language in and have some fun games and activities around language learning. So we have both activities inside and outside, and we let families sort of go with the flow and the rhythm of, their child's daily routine, because some little ones need nap times still. So we found a way to it's not a rigid, structured agenda. It's like, okay, we're coming together and it's a beautiful night tonight, so let's go out and pick berries. And kind of get everyone's buy-in before we do certain things. So it's been awesome. Yeah. It's really building community connectedness. And I feel like this is where children are connecting with other children and parents are connecting with other parents, and they're providing that support, and it's just happening instantaneously. It's been so good.
And is the plan to sort of continue doing this work in your community and continue kind of documenting and collecting data to sort of show kind of what doing this stuff early on, how it's going to sort of create a whole new set of outcomes for people?
Yes, we're definitely engaging in that, hoping that what we learn from this can become an evidence-based practice, because those are magical words in the funding realm.
Right, exactly.
But I think what we're trying to do is also create, like, here's this framework, and we adapted the Indigenous Connectedness framework and applied it to specifically Nome Eskimo community. But we're wanting to share like how we adapted and how other tribes could pick it up and adapt it for their communities, because it's not one size fits all at all. So we want other communities to know, like, this is what it looks like here. And it might look totally different for you over there, but that's good. And here's how you can adapt it and apply it to your own community. So we're studying connectedness. We've developed a draft connectedness measure. And that's where it's controversial too, because it's like, how do you put a number on a survey that explains your connection to the land?
Yeah.
That is an impossible task, I know. And we're just trying within the limits of, these numbers and the different meanings we ascribe to these relationships. It's like within that, well, how would you say, how connected do you feel? In hopes that that can show like participating in this has increased the connectedness in multiple ways. And that through that connectedness, we're now seeing these well-being outcomes.
Yeah. Yeah, it just sounds strange when you say it in some of those terms. What has it been like, sort of pivoting a little bit here? I've had a lot of guests on talking about sort of um, Indigenous research methods and wanting to sort of do research in, and not so kind of colonized kind of Western fashion. What's it been like kind of navigating kind of academia and sort of trying to apply, you know, these methods that as I've talked to some folks have been around for thousands of years. I mean, you folks have been doing research and collecting really good data in a way that, granted, Westernized folks don't accept, but it
Yeah.
still is really valid.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's been a challenge. I'm not gonna lie, there were times when I wanted to give up on pursuing my PhD while I was in the program because I just felt like I was being asked to do something that didn't align or fit what I felt was what my community was asking for. So there have been times when I feel like I'm apologizing to my community about, yeah, I know we don't want to have to do this, and it's part of what we need in order to show that effectiveness and everything. So I know that we have seen a lot of strides in terms of more acceptance of Indigenous methods and other ways of knowing. And I'm so grateful for, the Indigenous scholars who have done that, put in that hard work and have helped shift the paradigm in the science field a lot so that we're at least now talking about the two-eyed seeing approach and having the Indigenous lens be accepted more and more. And I still know we have our work cut out for us. And part of my bias and wish is that someday I don't have to do that translation or apologizing. We can just do it our way and show the results and that be accepted. But unfortunately, yeah, I feel like I go back and forth and have to write a grant in a specific way with these certain measures and that kind of thing in order to receive the funding in order to do the research. And that's where I accept that. And there is value in these measures and the Western scientific approaches. I just ask for the respect to have that. And like what I did in my dissertation, I'm doing this Indigenous story work piece, which how am I supposed to explain? Like I'm going out on the land and that's a method. I'm going out and getting these insights. It's like my place to really digest and synthesize and receive I feel like I'm also receiving some spiritual insights and support to help connect these dots and portray this in that way. And it's like, how do I explain that? But I think we're doing our best to shift the norms and the values in this area. So I appreciate others who are doing that work alongside me.
And with that, can you tell me a little bit more about this program in Washington, the iReach program?
Yeah, it's the Institute for Research and Education to Advance Community Health. So it's one of those long acronyms, but I think that this awesome program, iReach, and why I really love my colleagues and community research community here is we engage in research in a very relational way with community guidance all throughout the process. It's not us coming in and doing the work and then leaving. It's like, no, we're forming long-term relationships and we're not separate from the community. We're part of the community. And so with that understanding, again, there comes relational responsibilities. So with that, things take time. And I feel like we have a common understanding as an institute that we're going to take that time and we're going to make that effort and we're going to go after grants that align with our values and our mission and vision and help us do the good work in a good way.
And kind of on a related note, can you tell me a little bit about the team where this kind of all started? Was it the People's Awakening?
That was a group that was part of the Center for Alaska Native Health Research. It's CANR for short at University of Alaska Fairbanks. So one of my mentors and one of the people that I've learned so much from, Stacy Rasmus, has been running that program for a number of years alongside other amazing scholars who have taught me so much about how to do community-based participatory research and Indigenous research. So they were the ones that were engaged in that project, learning about connectedness originally.
So what's kind of you're working on this pilot project. What are some of the sort of the next steps and sort of plans for this ICF?
Yeah, so we hosted these wellness workshops and camps and piloted them. We're in our second year of it right now. And hoping we stay funded throughout the duration of a current grant that we have from the Center for Indigenous Innovation and Health Equity at Oklahoma State University. But what we heard from the families who participated was they're like, we don't want this to be the last time that we get together. Like they enjoyed it so much that they wanted to do it more. They wanted to get together more. They want to keep learning and growing together. And so we're figuring out a way to do that potentially on a quarterly basis, have at least a like full day gathering and again engage in cultural activities or get out there on the beach and talk and hear stories from an elder, or there's so many ways that we can promote connectedness, ongoing connectedness. And the other measure of success that we have, though, is that not only are we doing this and trying to facilitate it as part of, prevention and well-being efforts, but we want families to start doing that on their own. Like, wouldn't that be great if like our families got comfortable enough with each other that they just hosted their own get-togethers? And we have heard, that some of that has already happened, like going to birthday parties for the little ones and those kind of things. But we just want this to be the community norm again. This is the way that we lived. It's how we survived. It's what gives us strength, is to have these relational connections and to share knowledge and to share the highs and lows of life and to support one another through it. And to do that in a safe way, in what our ancestors knew, what they did. So we're onto something big here, is what it feels like. And I hope that we're able to expand it out and not only have this be something that transforms the child welfare system, but also the education system. So we're looking at, can we resurrect? I think what we're resurrecting through Piaget camps is our concept of the Kujgi, which is our community house. And if we could do that again in multiple communities and resurrect that community house once more, that's our place of learning. That's our place of building and maintaining connectedness. Like the possibilities from that, I think, are exponential in terms of those wellness outcomes.
It's interesting because you're not coming up with anything new here. You're just trying to bring back the ways things were before colonization and that were working so well for these communities. And the epidemic of even the concept of child welfare was created by colonialism, in so many ways. And so it's really just trying to get out of that system and back into the one you had always had in place.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So I'll never forget hearing this from Lagunai, who is from Cake, Alaska. That's a Tlingit community here, and she's been a leader in our state for years. And I was at a conference recently, and she was one of the conference speakers, and we were talking about what it means to be a healthy leader, what it means to be healthy and well, all those kind of things. But she was talking about how our responsibility, those of us who are doing this work and trying our best to help our children and families be well. She was saying our responsibility is to be the doulas of ancestral knowledge. It was just like, I never heard of it that way, but I just love that and
Wow.
am holding on to that still. That's our job. That's our work. And when we do that work, what the possibilities are, again, what those outcomes can be, we can just be ourselves. We can just have our children be who they are and not have to wear a mask and hide aspects of who they are and all those kinds of things. And if they aren't having to use so much of their energy to be someone they're not, and if they're not having to use all this energy to heal cycles of trauma in their family, what could come? What they could apply that energy towards. And I think we need that. We're going to need that desperately in the future, given all of the planetary challenges with climate change and wars and conflicts and government, distress and all this kind of stuff. It's like we're going to need our young people to be as healthy and well as they can be to help us shift this and kind of birth a new way of living across the globe.
You've been doing this research for quite a few years now, several papers that have been published. Have you had any contact from sort of other groups, other villages, other communities that have sort of, asked about, how to apply this or have tried to apply some of the stuff into the work they're doing and into their communities?
Yeah. I've had a number of invitations to provide, presentations and little miniature trainings and I feel like what I try to just remind everyone is that this isn't rocket science. We have a lot of aunties out there who are ready and jumping, up and volunteering to help, with what we're applying and doing. So it's just, I feel like you said it's not anything new. It's just a reminder of what's possible, of what we already know, but thinking about how to apply it and do that in a sustainable way so that this can become our intervention. Our community health and wellness will be what prevents child welfare and those kind of things. But it's a process. We got to start somewhere. There's a lot of deep hurts. That's where we need our ceremonies to really match up with that level of hurt. And I think as we help one another reconnect and build that connectedness, again, it's that like ripple effect of we're strengthening ourselves as a collective again, that we can hold. It doesn't matter how much hurt and pain there is that's coming up. We are able to hold that space and move forward.
Something you said earlier really struck me was the comment about the young children being called by their Inupiaq names, sitting up a little stronger. There's got to be a lot of power in that for the adults, in that these adults that are with the deep hurts and the severe trauma, to see the children, connecting with things that they never got to connect to.
Right.
What's that been like?
Yeah, it's I was doing another research study in Southeast Alaska where we're focused on intergenerational well-being. I was learning from elders who experienced boarding school who did not have the childhood that, that the type of childhood they should have had, learning the language, learning the traditions and songs and dances and those kind of things. But I was I'm in awe of these elders because they're the ones who are bringing it back. They're the ones who adopted this like can-do spirit. And so many of them, they're like, I'm not going to wait for someone to teach me how to make a button blanket. I'm just going to do it. That was one of the grandmothers. She just did it. And she's like kind of self-taught in many ways, but she is now a teacher. And she talked about seeing her grandchildren wearing their button blankets and being part of this dance group, and how this one community is really bringing forth the language in the schools and everything. And like, just they're learning that these elders are learning the language from their grandchildren. Like, it was just phenomenal to hear about the way that intergenerational healing was happening. And that's where I'm blown away by the people who have been through some of the worst trials and tribulations and traumas are still here, and they're leading the healing pathway forward and showing there is another way to do this. And we don't have to accept those lies and that oppression. We're going to be ourselves anyways. So it's just like, it's experiences and observations like that where I feel like I'm witnessing in real time the what it means to be healthy and well, what it means to rebuild connectedness. And that's had an influence on even my own life, where I feel like listening to everyone's stories helped me heal from many things that I was struggling with as well, and reconnect with a part of me that has always been there. I feel like we're born with this spirit and love and light, and that's the core essence of our being. And so our job is to remember that, to live it, and to help our young ones remember that and live it. Let each other remember that and live it. And then that's where we, again, see the community health and that wellness just flourish.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to bring this so palatable. The idea of, first off, I think the idea of seeing a child doing things that you as an adult maybe never thought possible for for future generations, like it was over at that point, and to see that it's still possible for this young child to, connect with the land, connect with the spirit in such simple but so powerful ways, and then for you to sort of see those elders see that and go, huh,
Yeah.
maybe I can do that too. The third secret word is mountains.
Yeah. And it's healing the elder to see their grandchild or the young ones benefit from what they were able to take as a trauma, transform it, process it, heal it, so that they don't have to go through that same thing. And to witness the pride in their grandchildren, that's healing. So it's that reciprocal relationship again, and that mutual benefit. And that's where I think the common approach to mental health treatment, for example, has been individual therapy.
Right.
And if you just do that, that'll fix everything. And it's like, well, there's that. And we also need the relational health to be there too. And we need this collective healing together experience and helping shift our environmental dynamics so that we're not just returning to a harmful situation time and time again. We need both healing in both places, internally and externally. So, and it's not something that can be forced. It's not something you can control. It's not a set agenda. And that's kind of along the lines of what, the community members were guiding us to go towards. Like, they're going to get out of it what they're ready to get out of it. Just like when an elder is sharing a story, we could hear the same story over and over and over again, but depending on where we're at and what we're ready to perceive and receive is how far and how rich and how deep we'll let the story be for us. Same with these activities, same with, how a grandparent perceives their grandchild receiving this button blanket they made. So hope that makes sense, but
Totally makes sense.
yeah.
Another thing that I love about this whole story, and that it's going to be, I mean, it's going to be great. I really want to come back to this with you again a few years down the road, because I think, we're just seeing little children sort of engaging in some of these practices, and seeing the power that has. Watch when these children grow, and watch when these children start to become mentors to their younger siblings, and become parents, and become, grandparents themselves, and watch how that whole community just changes into something magical. It's going to be amazing. But also, and you don't get to see this in a lot of, I don't know if this falls into the sort of psychology realm, but in a lot of psychological research, where the researcher themselves is healing and feeling the power of the work they're doing throughout the process.
Right.
And that's going to have a reciprocal effect on the community that you're working with, because they're seeing that you're with them every step of the way through this. And what a fulfilling journey for you to be able to you know, I from what we talked before, I know this is something you're going to do for the rest of your life.
Right. It is. Yeah. It's not an option. It's like, this concept of connectedness, I feel like we've been told over and over and over again about, but it's like it finally made sense. The more that I've listened to people and read about, and I see it everywhere now. But that's why our elders kept saying to know who you are, where you come from. And that's not something that someone else can define for you. You're going to have to figure that out for yourself. But here's some stories along the way, and here's some relational practices and traditions along the way, and here are all these teachings, and it's up to you to piece it together and create your own map of what it means to you and how to live it, because it shapes our beliefs. It shapes how we think and perceive and observe and witness, and how we live and connect and set boundaries, and it affects everything. So it's important. And that's where I'm like, I get it. I finally get it. I know now why elders kept saying that. That's the journey.
Yeah, Jessica, I'm super grateful for you sharing your story and your space and your time and the amazing work you're doing and the connections you're building with me today. And I'm super humbled, and I hope we can have you back down the road to see where things go.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Super cool. Yeah.
Sounds good. All right, you're very welcome.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Check out these related episodes of Behavior Speak. Episode 150, Education is the New Buffalo, Healing and Wellness for the Piikani Blackfoot People with Angela Greer. Episode 177, Susan Glukak and the Arctic Rose Foundation. Episode 182, Healing the Disconnect, Culture, Climate, and Community with Dr. Emma Elliott. Episode 210, Indigenous Cultural Revitalization with Dr. Haley Shea. And episode 220, Decolonizing Mental Health with Dr. Julie Smith Yillinimi. You can find us on Instagram and TikTok and subscribe to our YouTube page at Behavior Speak. And if you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.